I'll try to write the mistake.
Welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia on the marketplace where we talk everything finance and economics. Today we have a very special topic for you. We were scheduled to talk about, type of businesses you can start for $1,000, but today we postponed that to bring you a very special topic today, and that is the impact of the Russia crisis on the economy of Liberia. Again, welcome to the show. I have with me Alex, my co-host, Larry, Professor Larry Kennedy, our co-host. And today we're just going to look at this thing that is happening in Ukraine and Russia from an economic standpoint and see how that impacts the economy of Liberia. So, Alex, please, would you introduce yourself for us, please? I know we don't we're not supposed to be doing this all the time, but please, on maybe 30 seconds. You're muted.
Okay, yeah, thank you again, Gabriel, for that intro. This is Alex Coffey. Yes, Gabriel is right. We had our series on personal
Finance.
financial business, and we're going through different aspects of personal financial planning. And today we should have discussed 10 different businesses that you can do under $1,000. But with the issue going on in Ukraine and Russia and Eastern Europe, we just wanted to have a free and open discussion on how that is going to impact the Liberian economy. I'm sure it has an impact on the Eastern European economy. The U.S. recently issued some sanctions and all those things. How those things are going to bite the region, how it's going to bite Russia, how it's going to bite other parts of the world, especially since I'm focused on Liberia, we discuss all things Liberia, how it's going to impact Liberia. Larry?
So real quick, I'll simply say hi to everyone. It's always great being on FOL. This is a place where we all can take an opportunity to learn from each other. So hopefully we can have a good discussion, because there's a saying that when the U.S. economy sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold, right?
Yep.
What that also means is geopolitics, stuff that are happening in other countries that always seems to trickle down and hit a lot of the poor African countries. Why? Because we depend so much on what's happening in other countries in terms of our imports, in terms of our export. So let's have a conversation. Let's see how this thing is going to impact Liberia, and let's see how we can position ourselves, discuss solutions. One thing I like about FOL, there's no my and pot cussing over here. So let's try to keep it, we're going to keep it civil, and don't be posting no my and pot cussing on the chat either. Because
Yeah, we'll delete those. Yeah, definitely.
So let's be civil and let's have some very good discussions.
No, thank you. I think that is a great introduction. That is, that's what we do here. We elevate, educate everything, and promote all things Liberia. And as you said, we don't present ourselves to be, we know it all. We want to learn from the audience as well. This is why we always ask you to take your time, share the show, maybe take an hour, sit down and grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you drink, and let's have a discussion here. So for the next hour, this is exactly what we're going to do. So without further ado, let's just dive right into the show. Maybe you can give us a historical background, maybe a snippet of it as to why this invasion is happening. Why did Russia decide to invade Ukraine? To just to give us a baseline as to what is happening and why it's happening.
I don't know. We keep losing Alex, but
Yeah,
not to get
seriously.
too deep. It's kind of hard to get inside the head of Vladimir Putin. But
Right, exactly. Right.
yeah, just to kind of touch on the outside in terms of what's happening. So
Right.
you have the Ukraine.
Yeah.
At one time, the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. These guys were all superpowers, right? But historically, one thing I want people to understand: historically, a lot of countries that were one superpower. For example, Portugal, the United Kingdom, the Spain. We know the Spanish were traveling the world and
Yep.
colonizing a lot of places. over a period of time, countries tend to lose that superpower privilege.
Mm-hmm.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republic at one time, massive empire,
Mm-hmm.
but then they ran into this whole Cold War business with the United States, and the U.S. Essentially bankrupted them. Vladimir Putin, when he made his speech, he kind of looked back at the USSR, what he believed that the United States
Should have
did to
been.
them.
Right.
Exactly. But having the U.S., I'm going to be cynical for a minute. Having the U.S. kind of sit in your backyard because they're looking to bring Ukraine as part of NATO, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
They want to bring Ukraine as part of NATO, but that essentially means having the U.S. sit directly in your backyard. When the Russians try to do the same thing with Cuba, when Fidel Castro tried to invite the Russians, there was a huge crisis in the region. Up to today, Cuba is still paying the price because of that socialist ideology. Exactly.
Right.
But Putin, for months, had been saying he wasn't going to invade. He wasn't going to invade. Eventually, he invaded. It could be a number of reasons. I mean, he took over Crimea back in 2014. But Vladimir Putin may have also have some not just this whole issues of being spanked by the U.S. years ago, but there could also be resources over in the Ukraine. Ukraine is rich in resources as well.
Yeah.
So like Trump said when they took over Iraq, we're going in there to take the oil. So these countries are not just going in there sometimes to say, hey, we're doing this for political reasons. There could be some economic benefits to that as well. Right. But I think one of the key issues was having the NATO, the U.S. sit directly in Russia's backyard, right there in the Ukraine. I think that was the underlying issue. But, we're going to see how this impacts Liberia.
Alex, any the question is how, the historical background. Actually, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yes, look, I mean, some of the things that run into my head is why was this invasion all about in the first place? To me, I see it as Russia is trying to ensure that the NATO does not expand in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Because the NATO's expansion in Eastern Europe will kind of shrink Russia's influence.
Yeah.
Further, because like Larry said, back in the days you had the whole Russian Empire and all these things, and then came independence of these other Eastern European nations. Right. So Russia is now standing alone, and then Ukraine being the second largest country in that region and having border with Russia, and now Ukraine is trying to join NATO.
Yeah.
That will mean Vladimir Putin will lose some grounds there, and then he can imagine having NATO set up
military bases, right,
with military bases and stuff like that. So it's like you just set the cannon straight to Russia and one shot, boom, right? So the guy is saying, no, this is not going to happen. I'm going to take it on Ukraine and then take on the other countries or make them afraid.
Right.
And also, we should not forget the influence of the China, Taiwan sort of things. So you should understand that also maybe China is also in the mix supporting Russia. Right. So we have a two-fold situation on our hands right now, and of course Liberia, being a small economy and depending on Chinese products and the shipping lines and all that stuff,
right?
It could trickle down to Liberia in some way.
Yeah, no, thank you both, and I think both of you covered exactly the two biggest reasons why that happened. Like you said, you and Alex pointed out, one, it posed an existential crisis for Russia. Like imagine somebody just sitting right in your back door, right, with military bases right there, and when you try this thing back in the 60s, they came against you in Cuba. They came against you and got rid of you there. And then the same thing you want to do to me right in my backyard by putting these military bases in Cuba or cozying up to Ukraine to get military bases in Ukraine. Hey, anybody would do the same thing that Russia did. I'm not justifying that, right? I believe that could have been Russia could have taken a diplomatic approach to resolve that crisis, but it just it became like an existential crisis, right? So they acted, right? And both of you guys pointed out exactly the same thing too. There's resources in Ukraine, huge resources, right? And imagine NATO countries coming in and taking having access to those resources, in addition to having those military bases there. So, Russia, I think they just, went into crisis mode and acted. However, I believe NATO or the world power, superpower, should have stepped in as ongoing as this thing is. They should have stepped in to prevent what is currently happening. But they left Ukraine by itself. Ukraine right now is pretty much there's no help. And imagine these guys were the same people that made this country give us its nuclear power, right? You made me give up my big guns, and now I'm into a fight, and you're running away from me. You can't help me, right? So that's exactly what is happening, So I'm glad you guys shed lights on those.
But one thing, Gabriel, hate to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You're talking about a superpower with nuclear weapons like Russia. If the U.S. step in, then you're talking about bringing in another country that has one of the largest foot soldiers, China. China is aligned with Russia. It's going to get out of control.
Right.
And Russia doesn't have the right to invade any country. I mean, we can say, you don't want NATO in your backyard, but still, that don't give you the right to invade any country. And the reason why Ukraine never joined NATO is because Ukraine has been a very corrupt country for years.
Yeah.
They've been very corrupt. They should have joined NATO back in 2008. But NATO has certain criteria before you can actually join. And right now, it's too late. Right now, it's definitely too late to join. They've just been a very corrupt society. And you heard during the U.S. presidential election, some of the things that were going on back then in Ukraine. I know Joe Biden's son was also linked to some stuff in Ukraine. And the reason why you have the current president, who was one time a comic, being the president today, is because people just got fed up with the leadership in the country. They just got sick and tired of it. They say these guys got to go. And that's the reason why you ended up in the situation we're in right now, that Ukraine is not part of NATO. But we're going to pivot this, and we're going to take this into how this actually impacts Liberia, because like the show says, it's focused on Liberia.
Right. But before we get into we pivot to Liberia, let's look at the impact that has happened, that it could happen, that it could have on the world, right? And then we'll see how maybe you can pivot our conversation to how it trickles down to Liberia. Like, maybe you can answer it, and you guys can answer that question in a broader standpoint. What impact is that this crisis have on the world in terms of what in general currently?
Well, this is something that can scare anybody, especially for people like us who experience war in Liberia. Mm-hmm. Most of us were not alive during the World War I and World War II in the world, but at least we went through. I personally went through the latest war that we had in Liberia.
Right.
And so, as I sit in the U.S. here, I kind of get afraid. Like, what is going to happen to the rest of the world? What is going to happen if this thing spills over? You have Corona and one new strain of Corona, and everybody buying the juice from the store. Just recently in Texas, we had freezing rain, and I went to look for water, and I had to go from store to store to find water. Right. So, what is the impact? What impact such war can have on the entire world in the U.S., let alone with what is going on in Eastern Europe and in Ukraine itself? Right. So, and with all these different sanctions that the U.S. Has imposed on Russia, and now they're talking about imposing sanctions on Vladimir Putin and other officials.
Right.
It could have a toll on, and I believe that in fact currently the prices of gas is having a toll right now.
Yeah.
So with the U.S. economy and other economies suffering, as a result of Corona. This is additional suffering with inflation going up in the world. This is prices of goods and commodities going up in the stores, not just in Liberia, but all over the world. In the U.S., prices of goods and commodities have gone up as a result of inflationary effect from the Corona. So with the gas prices going up, other things are going to go up, and we're going to feel it in our pocket. And salaries are not going to go up as much as the prices of goods are going up. So the entire world is going to suffer.
Yeah. Okay. Larry, thank you for that. That's great.
Alex, Alex is on point. Russia exports to Liberia. Ukraine exports to Liberia. Ukraine at one time offered a ton of scholarships to Liberian students to go to Ukraine and study. Russia has a large deposit of oil. They provide oil and natural gas over to Europe. When this crisis first hit in terms of Russia's evasion, the U.S., the markets around the world, and one thing, if you want to know what's going on, you have to look sometimes at the financial markets. The markets over in Asia, because of the time difference, the markets open first and close first in Asia. So things like the Hang Seng the Nikkei over in Japan, the Hang Seng in China, all of these Asian markets, they tanked, right? The U.S. stock market was positioned to tank because the Dow, and I don't want to get too technical, we kind of look at something called the Dow futures as a way to kind of give an indication of how the market is going to go. The market was going to tank, but what happened? Biden stepped up to the plate and he said, you know what? We know Russia has a large deposit of oil and that will have an impact on gas and leads to inflation. But what did Biden do? Biden said, look, we're going to tap into our strategic reserve. The strategic reserve is down there in the southern part of the U.S. between Louisiana and Texas, right? They have all these caves and they keep a large amount of oil in there just in case something happens.
We got that right here, man.
You guys got all the oil down there, my man. I need to come there and tackle some of that thing. But Biden stepped up to the plate, right? The U.S. have about around 700 million barrels of oil in the strategic reserve. Biden said, look, we're going to tap the strategic reserve to make sure prices don't rise. That was a strong response. What happened? The market starts to adjust, saying, okay, this thing is not so bad. I know we're going to talk about the sanctions, see how it impact Liberia, and that's going to be interesting. It's going to have an impact on Liberia, no matter what people may think. But because of the oil, the natural gas that Russia has, that's going to play a part. But eventually, inflation is going to rise here in the U.S. You can't stop it. Biden can't keep tapping on the strategic reserve forever. There are laws in place that says how much he can actually take out of there. So that's the tip of the iceberg on the impact.
No, thank you both, and I think you guys both did. That's exactly what we can expect for that to happen. Russia, as you guys said, is the second. I think they're the second largest oil producer in the world, right? Imagine we posing all these sanctions upon them, and all of a sudden they, close out their reserve. It's only a matter of, depending on what part of the country, what part of the world you are, it's only a matter of days or weeks before everybody start feeling that. So with the U.S., they have a mitigation. They have a reserve. We have a reserve, of oil. So, if that happened, we can shrug our shoulder and say we don't care, right? But what about other countries such as the ones in Africa and other emerging markets in South America or in part of Asia, that don't have that reserve? What does that mean for them? So that is exactly what has been happening. And if you've noticed, as you guys pointed out, the stock market has been, on a steroid, right? I think we lost 700 points in, what was it, yesterday, right? And in addition to that, the prices of gas, they're going up, right? Just something that just happened a few days ago, it's already impacting markets here. So, but the next thing that I want us to get into maybe is the impact on, I think, Liberia, right? Correct me here if I'm missing the question here.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Right. I don't want us to. So the next one is, okay, yes, the sanction, right? What does the sanction mean for so the sanction that is being imposed on Russia official in short term or medium term, what does that mean for either the financial market or
I think, Gabriel, the first thing we need to do is to understand what sanctions did the U.S. impose on Russia.
okay, yeah, I think that's it.
Then,
Yeah, I may be
then
missing
we
the
can
question
begin
here.
to look at the trigger effect, and then we can also drill this down to what impact it has on Liberia specifically. So maybe Larry can take a shot at the sanctions.
The type of sanction that were imposed and what do they mean, right?
So I think first we need to understand what these sanctions are all about. So when the
Right.
U.S. imposes our sanctions, you can go to the U.S. website, the OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control. So the U.S. can sanction a particular country, or they can sanction an individual, right? So when an individual is sanctioned, like in the case of Prince Johnson and Varney Sherman, that sanction is referred to as a specially designated national.
Mhm.
So that means U.S. citizens, U.S. permanent residence holder, or anyone residing in the U.S. cannot do business with that person. Doesn't mean you can't, if you're not a U.S. citizen or Liberian, you can't do business with that person in Liberia, right?
Right.
The U.S. sanctions means the U.S., and not just the U.S., the EU, European Union got involved. They're sanctioning Russia as well. They're trying to hit the Russian economy very hard, and this is going to hurt Russia, right? But it's also going to hurt. They targeted several banks in Russia. They targeted banks in Russia. They targeted sovereign debt, Russian sovereign debt,
Mhm.
because how do you finance a war? You finance a war not just by printing money, right? Because that leads to inflation. You finance war by issuing debt. That's where the whole business of bonds came about, because a lot of the old kings and queens over in Europe were financing war and exploration by issuing bonds. So the sanction beginning March 1st, a lot of the banks cannot engage in buying Russian debt. That's going to hurt Russia. That's why Russia now is saying, hey, we're going to try to start using Bitcoin, right? They're going to turn into like a criminal empire, start using Bitcoin. But also, in addition to that, Russia has been trying for a very long time to move away from using US dollars because of some of the same issues. And that's why they formed that whole thing called the BRICS group, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to kind of work amongst themselves. But this sanction is massive. They're sanctioning banks. They're sanctioning Vladimir Putin. They've sanctioned I believe, the foreign minister.
Lavrov.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
that means no one U.S. citizen, residents whatsoever can do business with them.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt them. That also means LISCA over here in the U.S., the Liberian Ship Registry,
Yep.
that sends millions and millions to maritime in Liberia, got to be careful in terms of doing business with these guys. This is one reason why when you check out LISCA hiring people like Ed Royce and some of these other people, law firms, it's because LISCA have been kind of pinged and I'm not going to accuse them of doing anything illegal because I don't know the facts to it, but there are issues with the Iraq sanction, the Syrian sanction. Now you have the Russian sanction because LISCA registered a lot of ships that move oil on the ocean. So LISCA got to pay close attention to that because it's going to lose the revenue that LISCA is collecting, which will lose the amount of revenue that is going to Liberia as well. So this sanction is going to have a downstream impact, and it requires a lot of people. I don't want to get into the political side of it, but the government in Liberia needs to kind of pay special attention, to how it's going to impact them. Another way the sanction is going to impact, but I'm not going to go too far. Let me just swing it over to Alex real quick.
Yeah. Talking about that, because one of the things that they're doing is the technology sanction that to basically limit Russia's access to technology from overseas. Because one of the things the fear is that Russia is going to use technology to attack U.S. financial system and all that stuff, like what has been seen in the world in the past years with cyber attacks and all that kind of stuff. So one of the effect of this sanction is to limit Russia's access to technology overseas. Now, talking about trade,
Yeah.
so under these sanctions, U.S. suppliers will have to who want to ship goods to Russia. We have to obtain, licenses, for goods that didn't require one in the past.
Right.
So, so how if U.S. suppliers are shipping goods to Russia or vice versa, especially with U.S. people shipping goods, the Department of Commerce in the U.S. will want these suppliers to obtain licenses, and that will be a serious restriction on goods moving to Russia. Okay, goods such as microelectronics, telecommunication items, sensor items, navigation equipment, avionics, marine equipment, and aircraft components. So, of course, this will pose a huge limitation on goods going to Russia.
Yeah.
Now, how do you tie in that with the LISCA and the ship registry movement that Russia was talking about? That is something that needs consideration.
Yeah.
That probably the Liberian government needs to start looking at as to how Liberia can avoid any pitfall when it comes to movement of goods that are registered under Liberian flags.
Mm-hmm. Actually, those are great points both of you guys made. And I mean, I think if somebody was out of the central bank, or if any of you were the president, I think those are things that will probably be keeping you up at night. This crisis will be keeping you up at night as to, how does it impact my economy? How do I look at it from this standpoint? How does that, how do we deal with LISCA, or whether from a short-term standpoint or even a long-term standpoint? So I think those are things that, concerns that will keep any president up at night, and I hope it's keeping, our president up at night right now, because those are serious. But let's I think let's get into the other question here. If you guys don't have anything else to add to that question.
Yeah, another thing is the sanction. U.S. sanctions will be hitting is the military related. So they call that probably to say military end users. Okay.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, they're just looking at this military related because of their alleged ties to the Russian military. Okay, so they have a list of entities that do military business with Russia. So any company seeking to ship products made abroad to those military end users in Russia, we have to obtain the same licenses from the United States if they are using U.S. made tools that are made in U.S. military related tools, technologies, software for those products. So again, it's the same licensing regime that is going to be imposed. So that the intention of that is to limit Russia's capability in the future from having that military prowess to do to repeat such an action that is going on right now. So, but the question that lingers in my mind is these things will take an effect on medium to long term.
Yeah.
Right. It's not going to stop the war right now. It's not going to stop the immediate impact of the Russia's invasion. So,
right.
What is going to be done? But that is a different topic altogether. Which I don't want us to lose sight of the main topic on Liberia. So maybe, but again, how do we tie in Liberia to this whole discussion? I think that's where we should be going.
I'm glad you brought that up. That is our next question here, which we look at it from the the regional, which is in the Russia. Then we look at it from a global standpoint, the impact on on the rest of the world from whether energy or economic. Now we want to bring it down. I wish we could have narrowed it down to Africa, but I think we should hone in on Liberia. Does Liberia have any direct or indirect uh, impact with this crisis that is happening? You know, will this crisis impact Liberia directly, or does Liberia have any direct trade or trade with with Russia that will see this thing impact us directly or indirectly?
I I think it would hit Liberia in several ways. Number
Yeah.
one, yeah, Liberia does have a Russia exports around I think 7.5 to maybe 8 million worth of goods to Liberia on a yearly basis. When Madame Sirleaf left,
Mhm.
Russia wasn't doing a whole lot of business with Liberia. But since President Weah came in, Russia has been doing a lot more business with Liberia. It has, in fact, maybe quadrupled, right? So Russia ships a lot of stuff to Liberia. So food items, some of those food items that Russia is shipping to Liberia, you're not going to be able to find them. Now, Liberia can still do business with Russia without violating U.S. sanctions.
Mhm.
The problem with that is the ships that are moving the goods, are they registered by LISCA? If they are, then LISCA those ships cannot move those goods to Liberia. So that's a problem right there. Ukraine also exports a lot of food items.
Wait, there's
Some
a
of
there's noise in the background with somebody on there.
It's
Uh,
not me. It's got to be something work. Alexi
I
working
think
on
it's
something.
Dennis. Dennis.
Sound like Dennis is working on his pipes.
Yeah. Okay, but sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Hopefully it doesn't get
So
loud enough.
Ukraine also exports a lot of stuff to Liberia as well. But here's
Yeah.
the thing: if those goods are no longer coming into Liberia, again, supply and demand, right?
Mhm.
Those goods, shortages of those goods means prices. Liberia will have to get them from somewhere else, and prices
Right.
may go up. There may be some
Right.
shortages on the Liberian market as well. Those wheat, for example, number
Mhm.
one item that Russia is exporting over to Liberia, used to make bread, flour, all that stuff. That's going to be a problem. It's going to raise the price of wheat on the market, right?
Mhm.
In addition to that, again, like I said, LISCA cannot get involved in using a ship flag, a Liberian flag to move goods out of Russia to Liberia as well. The price of gas is going to go up in Liberia no matter what. And the fact that we depend so much on fuel for pretty much everything, the generator, all that stuff, when then 9.8%, the amount of people with access to stable electricity in Liberia,
Mhm.
it's pitiful. It's like
Yeah.
9.8% of the population have access to stable electricity. So we depend a lot on fuel for generators and stuff, right? I think I saw the data on the MCC's website. About 460,000 people have access to stable electricity in Liberia. Out of the top 15 countries, they're with the least access to electricity, they're all in Africa. So
Yeah.
Africa depends on fuel to pretty much run everything,
Yeah.
right? So on the other hand, there will also be some impact in terms of foreign aid to Liberia.
Mm.
The US is going to start pumping billions and billions into the Ukraine for
Ukraine.
this war. Remember that the US was spending about 300 million per day in Afghanistan. And this was one reason that Trump was saying, look, we need to cut the State Department's budget.
Right.
So I don't know if it's going to happen, but the U.S. may even kind of scale back a little bit in terms of the amount of foreign aid that is sent overseas to use it. So
Right.
that could be something else to look at. But one thing I wanted to throw out there, I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but there are Liberian students in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
What happens to the scholarship? What happened to the students in the Ukraine? Has the foreign ministry made any comments about that?
Or make contact with them at
I
all.
made contact with them.
Right.
Because right now, if I remember seeing the data, I think there's about 8,500 students from Africa that are over in the Ukraine. A lot of them from Morocco, from places like Nigeria, Ghana. But Liberia does have, I believe, up to 200, 250 students in Ukraine. I haven't heard anything from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You guys tell me, have you heard anything?
Alex, that I want to pass this question on to you. Maybe you can start out with the last question that Larry asked. Have you heard anything in terms of the government making contact with the student scholarship student in Ukraine? Um, you know, and what do you think this whole impact that is happening will have on Liberia?
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I haven't read anything or heard anything. I know we saw some funny stuff going on the internet that Liberia had taken action on Russia. It was some, but we passed it around and we thought it was not true. So yes, but I haven't heard anything. And then it's a difficult situation for even third world countries to say you're taking action or you're aligning. This is not the first World War, the Second World War, where countries were aligned with the U.S. or NATO or things like that. Even the NATO countries
Mhm.
are kind of having a drawback on the kind of action that they can take. This is not something that I'm taking sanction on that. But yes, indeed, I haven't read or heard anything from that end, because if you look at the countries that are in the Eastern European bloc, right,
Yeah.
where you have Ukraine, you look at country like Poland,
Yeah.
Hungary, Romania. What are some of the countries that say Liberia has
Trade relationships.
in
Right.
with the right relationship, business or trade or economic or diplomatic relationship. So if you look at Bulgaria, you look at countries like Turkey are a little bit far off,
Mhm.
okay, but they're a little bit far off, but they're closer. So quite recently, there are Liberians who um, are doing business in places like Turkey. So people moving away from China and going to
Mhm.
Turkey to buy goods and ship them to Liberia. There are Liberians in Turkey as well, and as well as Ukraine. Man, I can tell you a personal story of mine.
Mhm.
I had to make a decision to get my daughter out of Ukraine a
Wow.
few weeks ago. Yeah, she's in university. She was finishing her course. She finished her courses, and she was just trying to defend her thesis and to be graduating in June. And this crisis started. And she was like, "Well, Daddy, I got to worry about it's in my late brother's, younger brother's daughter. So, she's my daughter now.
Yeah.
So, no. So I'm like, I got to get it out of there fast.
Right.
Whatever it is, I got to get it there because experiencing war in Liberia and all that stuff got me scared.
Right.
And so, in fact, she woke me up to this news about the whole thing started. She said, "Oh, Daddy, you were right to get me out of there." And because the war just started, and some of her friends that are left there were communicating with her. I'm like, wow. Even though I'm not happy about the situation, but on the other hand, and one side of my mind say I'm happy because I got you out of there,
Yeah.
but she's also crying on the phone for her friends. So you can imagine other Liberian students that are in Ukraine or in other countries in Eastern Europe. Um, so the question it begs the question that if students are on scholarship, like Larry said in Ukraine, what is being done to get them out of there? I can imagine right now when it comes to trade. So people that were doing business, Liberians that were doing business in Turkey and other Eastern European countries, they're going to cease and desist from going close to there because nobody wants to go into the war. So
Yeah.
that is going to have an impact on goods and services in Liberia,
Mhm.
and obviously, like the prices of gas and diesel is going to go up. Prices of goods and services in Liberia may go up as a result of people not getting goods from Turkey and other Eastern European countries, if not Asian countries as well.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you both. I think that's, and so I want to push this a little further because if you look at not just Liberia, Africa as a whole, right? I think it's Larry who alluded to that. Most of the countries in Africa depends on what we call LPG, liquid petroleum gas, right? Which is in short the cooking gas, right? If you graduate from cooking on a copa, you go to you go to cooking gas, right? We know with this sanction, if Russia withhold their reserve, right, that the gas not only like every energy sector, we're talking about even plane tickets, right? Cooking gas, regular car gas, even goods and services, those will start going up. And more specifically, the liquid petroleum gas, right? The one that we use for cooking, that is going to be hugely impacted. And I think this is where Liberia and the rest of African country, stand to bear the more impact of this crisis. What do you guys think about that in terms? I want to focus on the energy sector, like the cooking gas, the regular gas, that we use in our cars and even plane tickets, right? Because those fuel will now start going up, right? So I want to focus on the energy sector. How do you think the energy sector in Africa or Liberia as a whole will fare against this crisis if this thing persists? Larry, I'll start with you.
One of the a major embarrassment, a major embarrassment in terms of African countries as a whole. We can look at the 15 countries in ECOWAS, starting from Benin all the way down to Sierra Leone. It's so embarrassing that we have an abundance of sun, but we don't really have renewable energy plants, the solar, the wind, and all that stuff. We rely heavily on fossil fuels. It is not that we can't continue to do that, right? The U.S. learned a long time ago, going back all the way in the 70s with the oil crisis they had. They set up all their strategic reserves. We don't have a plan like that. So when something happens over in places like the Ukraine, how many Liberians over there know where Ukraine is? But it's still going to impact them, right? Because this whole business of supply chain, in a globalized economy where if something happens one place, it's going to impact you because all of these economies are not all linked. You can't get away from it. We need to really start thinking about, hey, how do we start putting up? I know there are some projects in place right now or being developed, but we need to start looking about ways how we can harness the sun, how we can have solar farms, how we can use the wind to generate electricity. I mean, I know we're working on the hydro. I'm not going to get into the wasted money with the whole hydro over in Mount Coffee, but that's another story. But our economy relies solely on the extractive sectors. So when anything happens like in China, if China scaled back on ordering iron ore, it's going to impact the Liberian economy. If countries then scale back on rubber, let's say Firestone decides to scale back on rubber, it's going to hit the Liberian economy. We don't have a diversified economy. It is sad because a lot of the people don't even know where Ukraine is. They don't even know that Firestone is actually owned by a Japanese company. They don't even know. It shouldn't matter. So we need to kind of rethink the way we've been doing stuff for a very long time, because now some countries, I mean, look at the fact that we have to import wheat from Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
We have the ability to grow that stuff in Liberia. Why hasn't it happened? It is shameful. But we need to kind of we really need to look at in terms of how we put people in power, what their plans are. And we really, really need to educate the people, man, because it's sad. There's a reason why Haiti have over 29 coup d'etat.
Yep.
Everybody's fighting to be Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, right next to it, not too far from the U.S. Why are they so poor? everybody fighting to be president. No one wants to invest in the business sector.
Yeah.
Let me swing it to
Alex.
I'm actually trying to follow some write-ups on this. For example, Larry, let's start with you. I think in fact, you posted something a few days ago, and so maybe, and then also, and in the Critical Thinkers chat room, there's some write-up on this about that. Probably, I can read one of them, and we can give the layman meaning to it, what it means. But and then also, Jack Cannon also wrote something on his Facebook page on this whole thing and its impact on Liberia. So maybe if Larry, can you throw a little light on your write-up
which one? Which one?
On the same topic.
I think he's referring to the recent one that you posted.
The one you posted on your Facebook page on the Russian Ukraine crisis.
So let me see something real quick. I think I was discussing the fact that we have all of the resources. Okay, so Russia's attack on Ukraine, what it means for the Liberian economy. That's the one you're referring to?
Perfectly, that one.
Yes.
So that post is really focused on the fact that what I just mentioned, we depend so much on the extractive sectors. We depend so much on other countries for our livelihood. Because here's the crazy thing. I mean, Liberia is kind of, sometimes if you really think hard about Liberia, you would get a headache. You might get just the blood pressure up because it's really silly. Every time you have people like USAID, the World Bank, also known as IBRD, all these guys, and even now our government, what we tend to do, we tend to put out these 5-year plan, these big, hairy, audacious 5-year plan in terms of what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Every time we put out a 5-year plan, something tends to happen between 2 to 3 years that set us back. They put out a 5-year plan. By December of 2013, Ebola hit. The economy tanked because we produced rubber, but we ran out of latex gloves. So sad. We put out a 5-year plan, and by March of 2020, we had a pandemic with coronavirus. We put out a 5-year plan, and by 2022, we have an invasion, the first invasion on European soil in decades, dealing with countries that we do business with. So between every 2 or 3 years, something eventful happened that will impact the Liberian economy. We put out this ridiculous plan that don't work. If we don't diversify our economy, if we don't find a way to harness the sun, I hate getting into anything that I'm working on, but I would mention something. So there are a couple of Americans that went to Liberia. We've been in discussion trying to set up a technical school in Liberia to teach the students how to create solar panels. Mm-hmm. We already have an agreement with the schools over here that's going to provide that training over in Liberia to teach them. Because buying solar panels, if you go to Alibaba, buying solar panels is extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. And if you don't teach the people how to install it, how to repair it, you can't just keep buying it to replace it. It's not going to work. So transferring the knowledge to the young people, there are a lot of young people in Liberia who are anxious to learn this stuff. Transferring the knowledge over there would go a long ways in terms of developing the country, But the problem is, where do we get the money? We have the resources, so that means we can get the money. We just got to be smart about how we use the resources. So I talked about the fact that since President Weah came in, something I mentioned early, that the amount of money the amount of goods Russia's exporting to Liberia has increased from around 1 million to about 7.5 million. Same thing with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And Reva, do you guys know who Reva Livingston is? Mm-mm. Reva Livingston.
How do you call lobbyist?
The lobbyist. She runs KRL.
Yeah.
Reva Livingston wrote an op-ed piece. Reva Livingston wrote an opinion piece in an online magazine called The Hill. And she was talking about how the U.S. should extend its sanctions to other African countries and leadership. This is the woman that works as a lobbyist now for the Liberian government. I don't know if she's still employed with them, but she works as a lobbyist for the Liberian government as well. But what she mentioned in there is Russia has been making headway in Africa. I don't know if it was Mali or Burkina Faso, but Russian have been making headways in Liberia, which is not good for the U.S. one bit, right? So my piece is simply saying, look, we need to diversify our economy. Everybody talk about it. No one has done it.
Right.
We need to go back to the drawing board and see how it can be done. And how can you do it? You need to involve Liberians in the diaspora to transfer the knowledge to Liberians on the ground, so Liberians on the ground can do the work. And it's challenging, but if we don't do it, we will continue to sit in that 175 out of 186 countries on the Human Development Index. We'll continue to remain poor. So we spend so much time on social media discussing politics and castigating each other. We don't spend time discussing solutions. That's another problem right there.
Right. And I think we need to get into that. Maybe that's the next part of the show we'll get into. But
so there was this. Yeah.
So read whatever you have.
Yeah, there was this. The one I was talking about. There was this fake post on Facebook that said the caption, "Liberia imposes sanctions on Russia," and so somebody posted it in Critical Thinkers chat room. Then there was a write-up by somebody who apparently, I will not mention the name because apparently they don't want to be mentioned. I don't know why. But it says, I will read this. It said the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, expected impact on the Liberian economy and some initial recommendations. More generally, and in a reversal of fortunes, the Liberian economy can expect to be negatively impacted by the Ukrainian-Russian crisis. The shock to the global supply of crude oil and natural gas on the world market is expected to reverberate, with oil importing countries being particularly hit. So you're the economist that you will get a meaning for the BB terms and reverberate.
I think but anyway, go ahead, finish.
Right. So you say, I'll read that Ukrainian crisis, the shock to the global supply of crude oil and natural gas on the world market is expected to reverberate, with oil importing countries being particularly hit. A budget shortfall is ominous, giving current, and one of your big words again, ominous. No, ominous. So a budget shortfall is ominous, given current fiscal constraints. The Liberian government should thus start by hedging, one of your other big words again, by hedging against supply-side inflationary pressure. So you're the economy there, you will explain that one. By hedging against supply-side inflationary pressure. I would suggest, that person is saying that, not me. That person is saying, I would suggest that the Liberian government begins to immediately harness reserves. Again, harness reserves of petroleum products for at least 6 months, as we can expect a dramatic hike in oil prices. Furthermore, I would recommend that exchange controls be immediately put into place by the central bank to guide against a precipitous depreciation of the Liberian dollar against the US currency. Precipitous. So I tried to get my friend on the show today to explain this big economic English, but unfortunately he had some other undertakings today that could not permit him to come on this show. So Larry, please. You're the economist, and how you understand it?
I think the writer needs to come on the show to explain the data source.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will not be doing them any justice. Let them come on and they can discuss their term of reference.
The reason why I say I agree because I think most of that is actually the first one is the shock reverberation. What type of shock did he? At least you tell us, say there's a negative impact shock that will reverberate, right? In terms of harnessing reserve, I think Larry talked about that. You know, we do need reserve. Like you can't just have an economy that just rely on import and with this thing that's happening in Ukraine, what if the rest of the world oil prices are going up? What are you going to tap into? I mean, you're going to see an economy where there's cars lined up to go to trying to get gas because you're having gas shortages, which I think we've had several times, right? In terms of the hedge, what he said, hedge the inflationary pressure. I don't know what type of hedging strategy you will actually uh,
It says
execute.
it says start by hedging against supply side inflationary pressures.
Right. So that's hedge. So hedging typically what it means is, let's say it's like betting. So if I bet that this phone price is going to go up, right? I can also bet on the contrary that it will not go up, right? So that way, even if it doesn't go up, I don't lose any money. I'm still in a balance, right? So in terms of hedging against inflation, I mean, it's pretty much saying that you're going to cut inflation. If inflation does go up, what are you going to do to mitigate that, right? So those are the solutions that I expected him to list in there. And like Larry said, I wish he would have, you know, taken our invitation to come on the show to really, uh, you know, explain what he actually means in terms of type of hedging strategy to impose to help us with the supply side. Um, yeah, I think he would better be able to articulate what he actually means in those things. But I don't want to misquote him to say, he meant to say this and Gabriel said this or you guys said this. So um, uh,
But the
I
one
will
thing I,
leave
s-
it.
but the one thing I see is that we talked about earlier is, but I need, and it seemed to be mentioned in this little write up here was the prices of petroleum product on the market. I mean, this is something that's happened everywhere. I mean, in the U.S., the
Right.
prices of petroleum products have gone up slightly. Um, so with Liberia already,
Hmm.
we are experiencing in Liberia increase in even before the crisis started,
Right.
the actual war started a few days ago. Uh, Petroleum product prices were already going up, and to the best of my understanding, when I talked to somebody from Liberia, they said they were sometimes you got to check behind these things, but they said some little lines were coming up in terms of the shortage of petroleum products and that the prices are going up. Whether it is true, whether it is artificial, whether as usual, suppliers of petroleum products, are trying to force the prices up by, holding the government's feet to fire, and then their normal way is to hoard the petroleum products on the market
Hmm.
so that the prices can jump up. But if the prices go up as a result of what is happening with the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, what can the government of Liberia, any government for that matter, third world country like Liberia, what can that government do?
I think in our case, like in the US case, I think we talked about that earlier. They have a reserve. They expect these things to happen, right? If you anticipate something, you will plan for it, right? So in our case, if that were to happen, which is not a matter of if when it happens, which is going to happen because if this crisis persists, that's exactly what's going to happen. I mentioned earlier that I hope the president, that's what's keeping the president up at night right now. And
Mhm.
keeping you up at night, that's to say you're just going to worry. You have to think about solutions. If you can't import or get oil from the eastern countries, European countries anymore, does any other country in Africa actually have gas that you can tap into? Does that mean you start planning ahead now for, let's say, your next term or the next, whoever's going to come in to say, how do we mitigate any risk, future risk from this thing from happening? So let's say you start looking at solution to create your own reserves, right? You start buying oil to have oil reserves, right? Those are solutions you start thinking about. It happened now. Hey, I wasn't prepared for it. That is okay. But how do I prepare for it next time? So when it happened, I can have a solution to counter that, right? I think that's what we should be thinking about here. And I think if I were the president, that would be my sole focus right now. How do I prevent that? How do I start getting more oil right now? If I were him, I would start buying some oil or gas from other African countries right now to prevent that from happening if this thing persists.
In order to buy oil, and absolutely, you need to have like a strategic reserve, like we talked about, right? But in order to buy oil, they need money, and we know that government doesn't have a whole lot of money to kind of put. They're living day by day. We know that for a fact because they depend solely on the World Bank and the IMF. Because even in the president's annual message, when the IMF released the SDR, the special drawing rights, which gave them access to US dollars of around 23 million. The president mentioned that it was like a big thing. Receiving money from the IMF just simply shows that you don't have the ability to go to the capital markets. You don't have the ability to borrow money from investors. That's what, if you're using the IMF. So they will have to wait for the IMF to actually approve
SDR.
An SDR in order for them to take that money to go ahead and buy oil. The IMF would look at this crisis and say, okay, something we made just to approve it, because the IMF allowed Liberian government to, they give them SDRs to buy vaccines for COVID. So this may be seen also as a critical situation that would warrant the IMF to kind of give them some SDRs to go and redeem. But the problem is, out of the 15 countries in ECOWAS, 5 countries do not have credit rating. That means you cannot go and borrow money. This is why we were looking at Eton and working with the guy, I think over at Burkina Faso. Was it Burkina Faso? Iboma, the construction guy.
Guys, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's over at Burkina Faso. But that's the reason why we ratified loans with Eton and Iboma, because we were desperate to get money.
Right.
We can't raise money to do all of the things we need to do because we just haven't figured out how to use our resources and put it in the right place. A lot of the money that we get, we pay salaries with it. But I see some questions over here. People are asking.
Yeah, I think we should take comments because we're at the hour mark. So I don't have any. Is Dennis still in the background here? There we go. All right. So we have one comment here from River Says Pro. He said, Russia doesn't want a NATO country along their border. Simple. Yes, we agree. And
I agree. No complaints.
River Says Pro again. He said Cuba case is different. Castro was a revolutionary.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, I too disagree with that. I vehemently disagree with that. And this guy is busy. So another one, he said, imagine Ivory Coast telling Liberia not to join the Mana River Union. Why should Russia stop Ukraine from joining NATO? Do we want to expand on this, or did we cover it? I think we already covered that, right?
Yeah,
we talk about that. I would talk about that from the beginning.
Like you can't go in somebody, you can't go sit down in somebody's back door and then try the same thing to you. You took them out. So it's tick for tack, right? And Achimor Frederick said, don't forget what happened to Putin, hand-picked president of Ukraine. He was removed by a democratic revolution. I think Larry talked about that earlier.
Yeah, that's why Hillary Clinton said Putin had his hands so far up that guy yin yang. We're not going to get into that. So
So Campbell Dennis, Ukraine is a matter of strategic importance to Russia, and there is also an issue of territorial conflict.
No fuss and argument from me on that. When you look at what Russia, Belarus, Crimea, Ukraine, that whole
territory,
block, that whole territory of what's going on in there, Russia's trying to solidify their position to make sure. Same thing with China. This is the reason why China have issues with Taiwan, also having issues with Hong Kong as well. They want to make sure that U.S. Democracy doesn't take a foothold.
Penetrate, right?
Exactly. They want to have that, quasi-capitalism, socialism mentality to control the region. So nothing from me on that.
Which actually works for them, by the way.
Yeah, except when they try to tell Hong Kong that, hey, whenever we need to arrest someone, you're not going to have a hearing. We're going to come and grab them That's why we had that massive protest in Hong Kong. So, and
Hey,
that's why you see anti-war protests going on right now in Russia.
Yeah.
You know.
You listen to what the B brothers say, But anyways, River said, man, this guy's busy. River says, thank you for your comments. What were you reading that?
No, yeah, he said Talbot affiliation with communist / Russia caused him problem with the United States. Liberia should side with democratic Ukraine.
Yeah, but first Liberia needs to make a statement. Have anyone seen a statement? Because there was a harsh statement from the Kenyan government against Russia. A lot of people have been blasting, except for I think, who was it that one of the I can't think of the country name, but yeah, the Kenyan government put out a hard statement. President, we as government should put out a hard statement because of our relationship with the U.S. So yeah, it'll be good, and we can also work with the U.S. to try to get the Liberian students that are trapped in the Ukraine to see how the U.S. can help get those students out of there.
All right.
Yeah, somebody was asking a question, James Gidia City. Do you have someone from the central bank or the finance ministry to share their knowledge on the impact of the crisis in Ukraine?
I think we've reached out to those people several times. Our effort has been, they haven't. I don't think any of them hasn't agreed to come on the show here. I don't know why, but we've tried several times, but no, not on this matter. We haven't yet.
Yeah, this matter is just an open discussion, free discussion we're having on the issue. It was not intended to bring people from the government to come and discuss, but and for this particular show, it was just an emergency show, so we didn't have to reach out. So we just thought to bring on people to just have a free conversation on this. Emmanuel Jackson, Metal Steel, like Liska, might have a slowdown exporting Liberian iron ore to its refineries around the world. Yeah, what direct Metal Steel, for example? I know we spoke about Liska and the ships that are carrying Liberian flags moving around and not to play into the sanction and all that stuff. But what direct impact it has on Metal Steel? Or a kuha on Metal Steel.
And that's something that needs to be looked at, right? Because here's the thing. We're moving into an election year. Mm-hmm. You need to understand what impact, to what extent the sanctions is going to have on the Liberian economy. Because we know there's going to be something with Liska. Because, if you go to the Department of Justice website, you can see situations where Liska has been involved, working with the DOJ, because of the Iran and Syria sanctions. So now you want to see how this sanction is going to impact, dealing with Russia, how it's going to impact Liberia as well. One of the things that the banks over here in the U.S. did when they said, hey, you cannot do anything with a Russian sovereign debt, you cannot lend money to Russia. One of the things that banks decided to do was to run that analysis and say, hey, how is this going to impact our bottom line? And a lot of the banks came out and said, okay, it may not be so bad. We're going to feel it, but these are the steps we need to take right now. This is what the central bank should be doing as well. How is this going to impact the Liberian economy? It's going to have an impact on the Liberian economy. It's going to slow things down. Leading into election, this is the key, right? Leading into election, if this thing has the propensity to slow the economy down again and take it down to like a recession, meaning the economy doesn't grow 3 months in a row, mm-hmm. I can't remember ever seeing a president win re-election when the economy was in a recession. Mm-hmm. So we may end up losing the election, but again, do we discuss issues?
That was the question I was going to ask you, Larry. Our election, are they issue based? The people really.
Nah, it's all personality based. You get out there, the person who can scream, holler, cuss the best sometimes end up being, the most popular one. Take a look at the legislators, right? And they stand there all day going order, order, order. And then at the end of the day, they get paid, $6,000-7,000 and call it a day. So it's ridiculous. Order. That's what they do.
No, but mind you now, Larry, even though we can say that, but also say if this has a toll on the Liberian economy, if prices of goods rise and inflation has a different trend, one of the things Liberia is working on. I say we because I'm a patriotic Liberian. Like we're working on is to. I'm not saying I'm working with the government per se, but I'm speaking as a patriotic Liberian. So we're working on as a country is to ensure that we pass the MCC scorecard next year. So one of the things we're working on is the inflation to ensure that the inflation keeps going down. Whether we're calculating it right or not, but at least we got to make sure that the inflation goes down so that we can pass that aspect and other things that we're working on. So if this thing has an inflationary effect on Liberia where the inflation will go back up and we don't meet that number, that could be an impact on the possibility of, this is something that that we think the government's record again. There was a big deal when Liberia failed the Millennium Challenge the last time, all right? So, or most recently. So this will be a big deal. Now, we have a new budget of 786 million for this first time. It's big budget. If this thing hit our budget, again, if we have a budget situation where we can't meet all these big numbers that we put in, and we can meet all these glory of the first time budget, or some, we're moving to close to $1 billion and stuff like that. It could have a direct impact, and it could have an impact on that re-election situation that you're talking about. So while it is true that our election is not all that issue based, but Liberians are moving to the side where now they are looking at issues, they are looking at things that impact their bottom line.
That is great. That is good. That's good to hear, by the way. I would rather we look at issues than, like Larry was saying, where we just attack each other with all these noise and follow personality. I think we need to be a focus, an issue-based, country where we look at the people who address the issue, who have solutions for the issues, the problem that we're having, than, having all these personalities and putting them in power and realizing they were just, mere personalities. So that's refreshing to hear, honestly.
And that's why, in fact, this comment from Emmanuel Jackson: will the crisis between Russia and Ukraine be hurdles for the Liberian government to raise the revenue for the 785 million budget? That's exactly what I was saying. So, the areas where the revenue increases is into international trade. So if Liberia is trading with other because the international trade is all about goods coming in, more goods coming in, and input duties and all that stuff, and then also people like Metal Steel exporting the iron ore, and so all those things are factored in our budget, our international trade aspect. So if, for example, this crisis prolonged and is spiraled down to other countries in Europe, it spiraled down to Asia, it affects LISCA, the countries that are the ships that are carrying our flag, and revenue dwindles in those areas into the international trade side of our budget and into the contribution of Metal Steel and those things. It could have an impact on us raising the kind of revenue to support this the budget that we have, and as Jackson said, it clearly could impact our economy, and by extension, it could impact the chances of this government when it comes to the 2023 election next year. So
let me touch on that real quick, Gabriel.
Yeah, go ahead.
I never believed that the Liberian government could raise that level of money, the 785.6 million. From the get-go, I didn't believe it. Why? Because they've had budget shortfall for
budget. Right.
About exactly 3 to 4 years in a row running. They have budget shortfall. They have budget deficits. They couldn't get they couldn't raise $500 million. They just couldn't do it flat out. The reason why a lot of countries are able to raise that kind of money, and I would say Liberia can raise that 785.6 million, if we had credit rating from the big three, the Fitch Investor Services, the Moody's, what's the other one?
Standard and
Fitch
Poor.
and the Standard & Poor's, right?
Right.
If we had credit rating, then we can do like what Ghana did. We can go out and float like a bond to the capital market and borrow that money. This crisis is going to have an impact on the Liberian economy. It's going to slow things down a little bit because if we have global inflation, it would trickle down to Liberia. And like the strategist, what Bill Clinton said, Jim Carville said, it's all about the economy, stupid. He said, focus on the economy. The reason why Darius Dillon did so well in Montserrat County is because this harmonization that the IMF forced down the throat of the Liberian people, Eurobond, thank you, William. You can float Eurobond, and Eurobond just means you are denominating your bond in another currency. It can be euros, it can be dollars, it can be Japanese bond as well. Okay, thanks for that, William. The reason why Dillon did so well is because the harmonization that the IMF forced down the throat of the Liberian people, it pissed off the people. It pissed off the seditionists. They were pissed off. So if you have your economy going downhill because of this global crisis that's taking place in Ukraine, I can't see a president winning re-election when the country is in a recession.
Yeah.
So if the opposition did well by discussing the issues, bringing things like this up, it will have an impact on President Weah because they can brag that the GDP, the total goods and services produced in the country, they can brag that it increased to 3.2, 3.6%. But the World Bank put out that 200,000 people became poorer. Mm-hmm. So that's the epitome, that's the clear definition of growth without development because more people became poorer while you're saying that GDP grew. Mm-hmm. This crisis is going to have an impact on foreign direct investments. When Madam Sirleaf left, foreign investments in Liberia as a percentage of GDP was around 7.2%. Since President Weah came in the first year, it dropped to 3.5%, and it has been dropping year after year after year. So this thing happening, we need to pay close attention to it. It's going to have an impact in Liberia. So the CBL needs to start doing the math right now, how it's going to hit us. The National Investment Corp, all these guys, they need to come and start looking at it, how it's going to impact us, but they need to start having some discussions, how it's going to hurt the Liberian economy.
Yeah. And we have CFC Somalato. He said, are you guys Liberian?
Well, I don't understand the context under which the person is asking the question, but yes, we are Liberians.
There you go. I don't think we could have answered that any better than that. And then this truth. Excellent topic. Great insight. But it is a bit too late. The war has started. Do you guys think it's a bit too late? I mean, there can be some ad hoc, right? What do you guys think?
It's never too late. It's never too late. The sanctions can change Putin's mind and have him pull out. The one thing we don't want is for this to escalate. Because what Putin is doing right now, the war is not so much in terms of, don't focus so much on the fighting. What they're doing now is the cyber attacks that is going on. That's why the U.S. government is warning the U.S. banks to pay close attention, strengthening their security system, because Putin is going to retaliate by attacking U.S. banks. Years ago, everyone found out the way to cripple a country is to hit them financially, economically. This is why we had 9/11. They tried to take down the World Trade Center, tried to hit the U.S. economy from that. So it's never too late. I think there's an opportunity for diplomacy, and hopefully we get to that sooner rather than later. But once Putin made a statement, he's going to retaliate. Biden came back and said, if Putin retaliates, we're going to escalate the retaliation and sanctions even more. The worst thing that could possibly happen is it turns now into beyond just a regional conflict and other people start getting involved.
Yeah.
Complete disaster. You cannot have a lunatic like Putin who has access to nuclear weapons going against other nuclear power countries. It's going to be a complete disaster. Yeah. No one's going to be the winner from that one.
Yeah. All right.
So. Yeah, but I think that my understanding of the question was in the context of like, if I understand it that way, in the context of Liberia. So is this discussion late in the context of Liberia to kind of well, maybe that the other side of the question, you answered the other side of the question, Larry, is it late to have this conversation within the context of making these advisory or proposals to recommendations to the Liberian government? Should we have had it before the war started? But something that's in my mind too is that, okay, is it, yes, we could have had this conversation, but again, it's never too late. Or should the government itself put itself in a position where they're preparing ahead of time before these things hit? For example, we're talking about the possibility of increases in petroleum prices and how to deal with that. Again, so, and then we're talking about the effect on the exchange rate and things like that, how the government can deal with that. So I don't think it's ever too late, even within the context of Liberia, it's ever too late to have this conversation.
No, I agree with you. I think it's never too late. I think we could have, matter of fact, we should be, we should be scrambling right now in terms of how to deal with that. But let's move on to the next question here. Michael Mason, what did Liberia do? He's taken up back, but maybe you guys can answer that. Sorry, do we want to answer that question, or we? All right,
I think William said we'll take that up on another show. We're
Okay.
focusing now on the crisis. Yeah, go
ahead. Okay. There will say Michael Mason again. There will be no external economic sanction on Liberia. We are already suffering from economic
someone was
sanctions.
joking. He's reading a post where someone was joking about that. It's not the person wasn't serious.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, he brought that out here. John Williams. Liberian people are generally complacent people. They are like turtle. It takes fire on their back to make them move. Combine that with a visionless leadership and an opposition that is inept, and then you have the situation of Liberians right now. Because right now Liberians are like a monkey that the gribble and crime people called glee or glay. They are having fun time swinging from one tree to another. They are not thinking about tomorrow and the possibility that the war could possibly have on the economy. Okay, that's too harsh. I don't know what you guys think about that. If you even want to respond to that.
Yeah, but Martin Brown added to that too. It says the Liberian government live one day at a time. There absolutely no plan. So
I don't know, Martin, because they had the pro-poor agenda for prosperity. That's a plan. That's a 5-year plan. How is that working out?
That's a good question.
So, but I think from our end, as focus on Liberia and discussion, patriotic citizens that are interested in the forward march of Liberia, or some of these things that we're discussing, and in fact, beginning a couple of weeks from now, we'll be doing a series on how to improve the Liberia economy. So what we've over the past few weeks, what we've done is to look at personal finances. So how we individual, because you got to be in a better position to be able to do some of these things that we're talking about. So we started with personal finances, and now next week we'll be looking at 10 businesses to do under $1,000 investment. Then after that, we'll be looking at different ways to improve the Liberia economy. Hopefully, we'll be providing recommendation. We'll be discuss. Of course, we'll have to discuss the issue. We'll have to discuss what is going on wrong and how it can be fixed. And we are hoping that somebody somewhere, the powers that be, or somebody can listen to some of these things so that we can begin to prepare as a country. So for me, that's what I can say to that question.
Yeah. And Melistasi, or whatever you had. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. It's an interesting discussion. Thank you.
You see William King's question?
William King. I didn't see it. Thank you for the discussion. For discussing this topic. William King. Yeah. Okay. At the moment, Liberia continues to pay her debt. Please explain the difference in paying debt and credit rating. That is a great question,
That's a
actually.
great question.
Right.
So, two things real quick, William. What makes this interesting is, and this again, you have a crisis now over in Europe that's going to have an impact on Liberia. Over the past 2 years, maybe a year and a half, Liberia has been in what is called a debt suspension initiative. They haven't been paying a lot of the external debt, right, because of COVID. So Liberia
The
signed up,
principles. Right.
exactly. Liberia signed up for that program. So imagine, come and, saw a post that Darius Dillon put out there as well, asking the Liberian government to offer evidence in terms of the local debt. So you have your domestic debt and you have your international debt. So I'm not going to talk too much about the domestic debt right now because Dylan raised an important question, and I would love to follow that to see how the government proved that. On the international side, starting, I believe, in March, the Liberian government needs to start making payments on its international debt. So you have a situation brewing in Europe where it may lead to global inflation, right? It may lead to another slowdown in global economy, in economic activity. And then at the same time, you have to start making debt payment. Then the fact that you cannot borrow money because you don't have credit. So credit just kind of shows your capacity to, for countries, in order to have a credit rating from the big three, you need to show you have good governance in your country. You need to show that you are politically stable, right? You need to show that your economy is going to be growing. Then what happens is you call one of the credit agencies, whether it's Standard & Poor's, Fitch Investor Services, or Moody's, to come in and do an analysis. But we know Liberia have a poor governance issue, right? So it's not going to happen. We know in 2008, 2009, Liberia had a debt forgiveness of a little under $4 billion.
Yeah.
That's another problem. Out of the 15 countries in ECOWAS, the 10 countries that even have credit rating, all of their credit is kind of sketchy, meaning it's treated as junk bond
bonds.
status.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
good credit. The only country in Africa that has really good credit is like South Africa and Botswana. Botswana has AAA credit rating. That's why Botswana can borrow money whenever they need it. So Liberia has credit issues. At the same time, they cannot raise money. At the same time, in 2022, they have to start paying the debt owed to the national community. At the same time, we have an issue in Europe. Where do you get the money from to do all? It's going to be extremely. That's why I'm saying we may end up in a recession, meaning the economy is going to shrink. And if we end up in a recession, that's going to lead to unemployment. And if it leads to unemployment, it's extremely difficult for a president to win re-election in a recession year, in a recessionary year. I hope I didn't get too complicated.
No, I think you answered that. Given the for the sake of time. All right, so I don't know if we should read this. This is from Jimin Eastman. Can the panel address the question why Liberia is having electricity problem? And what are the adverse effects, and how can we resolve it? So he's talking about the current electricity problems. I'm not sure if I'm hearing. Well, I know that has been existing, but I don't know if there's anything that has come up recently.
No, but
you guys want to address that?
I think that's a good question. Even though it's not directly related to what we're discussing today, but let me just take a peek at it. One of the biggest problems we have with electricity issue, we have the issue of the whether we should have built a new dam, whether we should have done this, whether we should have done that. Yes, but right now we have the West African power pool. We'll be giving Ivory Coast the money because we're sorting that energy from Ivory Coast, because some of these West African power pool stations that are based in Liberia, I think about two of them that are feeding out of Ivory Coast. There's another one feeding out of, I think, Sierra Leone or somewhere. So we'll have these energy. So what our duty now is, the West African Coal Project is done. So our duty as a country is how we distribute that current, how we take that current from source and distribute them. Okay, so yes, we can find money to build the new dam and power station and all that stuff, which is in Liberia. But in the meantime, we have a problem with power theft. And we continue to make the same mistake over and over. We are attacking the symptom of the problem instead of attacking the problem. We are making all these laws to make power theft a criminal offense, all right? But on one side, are we grabbing people and taking them to court to actualize the law? But even if we do that, the issue is not about the people that are stealing the current. Yes, they need to be punished for stealing current. But, for example, if you have a community of 100,000 people, if you bring a transformer that supplies only 30,000 people, what do you expect the other 70,000 people to correct the current from?
Right.
Let's assume they were stealing everybody decided to steal the current. You will have another 20,000 people on that small transformer. Another thing is service delivery. The LEC itself is challenged with service delivery. People want services, they're not giving them. So people resort to the shortcut because you apply for a meter, it takes you months and months. You got to pass through all kind of channel to get the service. Another thing is the LEC itself does not have the mechanism, internal mechanism such as technology. There's easy technology to fight power theft. Okay, to see the problem as source. I think somebody working at LEC explained to me that it would take about $3 to $4 million to put that kind of thing in place to be able to catch power theft situations quickly. We have another problem of management. The problem of because the very LEC people, the people that work at LEC, they are perpetrating, they are the main proponent of who are supporting this power theft situation. So it starts from the LEC, you have a crisis in the LEC itself with management. Of course, that's a symptom that is happening in the entire country.
Yeah.
Right? Where people going scot-free with doing anything, they going scot-free, not putting the right people in place, the visionaries in place, right, to bring out the solutions for to benefit the people in a lasting way. So if you don't have visionaries at this institution like LEC, then you have this problem. If you have people within the very LEC that are encouraging or are taking part in this power theft from time to time, like the water and seawater, from time to time, not just even this government, from time to time, people working in the institution, they are the one are masterminding this power theft situation, and nothing has been done. So you have that, we have a catch-21 situation that we are in. That for me, that's my short answer to that question.
Yeah, for the sake of time, I know we could stay here all day and actually go on and on discussing these topics. I think we had a great discussion. I believe you guys will agree with me on that. Yes, if we had the time, we could have gone maybe for 2 hours or so to really, maybe pivot and continue pivoting. But time is well spent. And I think we came here to fundamentally answer few questions: the impact of the Ukraine-Russia crisis on the world. What does that mean for your pocket? What does that mean for energy source in the U.S.? And we also narrow it down to Liberia. So with that, I would like to maybe take 30 seconds or maybe a minute or so from each one of you to to give your closing statement. Now, in this closing statement, I want you guys to look at it as a solution standpoint. Let's focus this one on Liberia. If you were in any leadership position and as you were seeing this crisis unfold, what would be your solution or recommendation to the body of the government, either the central bank or directly to the president? Or if you're advising the president, what are the things that you recommend him or him to look at? You know, you're muted, Alex.
Yeah, let me take a shot at it because I got to run quickly.
Yeah.
Because I'm under pressure to run right now. So the way I see it is the whole governance process and preparing ahead of time. Like some of the recommendations that we all put on here. It's like in any crisis, say we're talking about the prices of petroleum product going up. How do we guide against?
Yeah.
And we discussed that here. So somebody was asking a question about us, talking to people from the Ministry of Finance or the central bank. But the thing is, if our governance structure is all set up, then as a country we think ahead to prepare for these kind of things coming up. This Russian-Ukrainian crisis has been discussed long time. For example, I took it as an individual. I took a decision to take my daughter from Ukraine. Oh, she was like, oh no, I gotta do this, I said, no. Right now, my only focus is to get you out of Ukraine. Graduate or you graduate, get out of Ukraine. When you get out of Ukraine, we can figure out something else for you. So I took a proactive action by getting her out of there quickly. And lo and behold, the crisis started. She's out of there. And I feel pity for everybody else. I wish this does not happen. But as a country, as a government, we should be proactive. We should prepare ahead of time for these kind of things. We should if it escalates to the extent that we're not able, we're just not able. But as a country, we should always prepare ahead of time. And so in the future, we should tighten our governance structures. We should tighten all these different aspects to meet any challenges that come ahead of us. Here's a situation we probably could face a possible budget constraint situation where our budget, all our advances that we're making on the budget and stuff like that could be thrown out of the window. So we should really prepare ahead of time.
Yeah, Alex, over to you, sir.
Thank you, but before I go, I know Gabriel, you do that, but let me just do that. Next Saturday we'll get back on our track. We'll be talking about today. We had to just bring this topic as a discussion point. So we push our topic for the 10 businesses to do on $1,000. We push it to next Saturday, and after that, we'll start a series on how to improve the Liberian economy.
Well said, Alex. Over to you. Larry. Sorry.
I'm going to take 30 seconds and keep it real short. What the government should be doing right now. What it should be doing is talking to the IMF to tap a little bit more of the special drawing rights because they need money. We've seen it in other economies where when you see this kind of threat, you need capital. So because they would need to buy food, because if Liberia hits another recession, it's going to be bad. So what they need to be doing right now, talking to the IMF, talking to the World Bank, and tapping into the special drawing rights. Maybe in another show, we can discuss what SDRs are all about. But they need money. And then that money should be used now to start buying. And we saw some of the questions earlier. Start using that money right now to start stocking up on petroleum.
Yeah.
Start stocking up in petroleum because your hospitals, your clinics, a lot of the critical institutions over there runs off gas, off generators. Yeah. So you need to have petroleum in the country. Okay. Use some of the money to also buy food items just to make sure that you don't have food inflation as well. So do those things, but then have a conversation with LISCA. Talk to LISCA to see what can be done as well to make sure you're not placed in this predicament. What can LISCA also do? But we need to have another conversation on LISCA because LISCA, I've always been saying this, they're ripping off the government. So we'll have another conversation on that.
I think we should put it in our topic. I agree with you, but go ahead.
Yeah. So we're going to expand on that. But, I just want to say thanks to the the listeners, to the folks who come in here, listen to us, and who pose the questions. But next week, definitely, we want to talk about the top 10 businesses you can start for under $1,000, right, in 2022. There's a lot of opportunities. Talk about how to get yourself registered, how to get your name, how to use social media to advertise, what kind of businesses you can start and start making money without having to rely on someone hiring you. Okay. Yeah. So back to you, Brother Gabriel.
No, thank you, Prof. And I think that's all we have for today. Thank you all for following us. Thank you for the comment. And I think Larry and Alex, mentioned what we're going to be talking about next week. So join us. Please do join us next week. And we look forward to having you. As always, we don't leave this program without having our favorite song that, everything we talk about, we're not here to criticize the government, whether you see it as criticizing the government or, not criticizing the government, whether we're giving solution or you think we're just rambling here. Thank you. We're all Liberians, and everything we do here is for the betterment of Liberia.
That's and I always look forward to that song. I always look forward to that song. Y'all hang around and listen to that song.
Yeah, there you go. Without further ado, thank you, and we'll see you guys next Saturday. Adios.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Liberia all we want. Liberia, oh. Liberia all we want. Liberia,